Hello, everybody. I'm so happy to meet you together with Dušan, Šuput, and all of you for the last colloquium in this semester.
Yeah, I'd like to welcome everybody, and also I'd like to introduce our president, Klaus Mainzer, who is not here in person, but he sent a short introduction so that we can listen to him. And Violeta, please start
Thank you very much.
his recording.
Dear members of the European Academy of Sciences and Arts, dear guests, once again, I would like to welcome you to our Arts Meets Science lecture series. Once again, I would like to thank the Dean of the Arts class, Violeta Dinescu, and the Dean of the Medicine class, Dušan Šuput, who have put together this evening's program. The first lecture will report on the practice of a composer and a cellist. Normally, we know composers who use the piano to support their composing work. With the cello, it will be new, at least for me. The lecture will also be about contemporary music. In the history of music, there have, of course, been examples of great composers who were also great virtuoses. For example, Chopin, Liszt, and so on. The title of the talk, Between Scylla and Charybdis, suggests a contrast between which you have to maintain a balance. I'm curious. The next lecture will deal with the role of women in history of healing, especially in the 19th and 20th century. I have been working on the history of women in philosophy and science since the early 1990s. At that time, I supervised doctoral theses on female mathematicians, physicists, and philosophers from the 18th to the 20th century. Recently, as president of the European Academy, I helped launch a European Center for the History of Women in Philosophy and Science. I'm therefore very interested in finding about the role of women in the history of healing, and not just their role in medicine as a university discipline. Even in prehistoric times, women were said to be closer to the secrets of nature. The interesting question is whether this is still true today, when women are taking up the same professions that were once exclusively recognized for men, and vice versa. In the end, aren't men also equipped with this natural intuition when they work in the healing and care sector? Exciting questions. Perhaps tonight we will also succeed bridging the gap between the healing professions and music as therapy. It would be desirable for the interdisciplinary character of this lecture series. I thank you for your attention.
Well, Violeta, very nice. You succeeded to present our president's talk. He's usually very inspiring, and I'm looking forward to the next first speaker, and I'm asking you for introduction.
Thank you very much. The first speaker is Graham Waterhouse. He was born in London and currently lives near Munich. He received his musical education at Highgate School in London, Cambridge University, and at the Musikhochschule of Essen and Cologne in Germany. He is active as a freelance composer and cellist and has founded several ensembles, including a piano trio and a string quartet. Graham Waterhouse has played with ensembles such as Ensemble Modern, Musikfabrik NRW, Philharmonia Orchestra in München, Kammerorchester, and so on. He has performed his own cello concerto in many countries like Switzerland, Germany, England, and Russia. He is a composer in residence at the National Chamber Music course in Oxfordshire, as well as at the courses in Germany and France. In 2018, was awarded a composition PhD from Birmingham City University, and his latest work for Heckel phone and strings was first performed to great acclaim at the Strauss-Tagen very little time before in June. I'm happy to invite Graham Waterhouse.
Thank you very much. Can you hear me and see the screen?
We can hear you, yeah.
That's good.
Yeah.
Well, my title is Between Scylla and Charybdis, just to explain, this is a metaphor for opposites. Scylla and Charybdis were two sea monsters that guarded the Straits of Messina opposite the coastline of Sicily, between Sicily and Italy, and is mentioned in Homer's Odyssey. And I'm using these two opposites, these two sea monsters, as a kind of metaphor, as a symbol for contrasting aspects, in my case, of a musician's life. So one example I'm going to use is the contrasts between traditional musical thinking and musical playing and progressive. The opposites are also inherent in the very title, including me as a cellist and a composer. In a way, they're two opposite musical disciplines. The composer works slowly, and a piece of music could perhaps be interpreted as a time capsule. One's thinking in a particular time is then encapsulated in the piece of music. And there, that piece of music remains theoretically until eternity. Whereas the experience of a musician, a performing instrumentalist, is that the performance happens in the very second in which it plays, and then that's it. It's a memory, or it's relegated to memory. Now, my previous piece for cello solo was called Equinox, which is an astronomical term meaning equal light and equal dark. And it struck me, writing that piece, that the tension of opposites was also palpable, not just in the concept of equal day and night, but could be included to musical parallels or parameters such as high, low, loud and soft, and dissonant and consonant. And I became interested in how opposites throw light upon each other and how one is really dependent upon the other. And I came across this Martin Walser quote, "Nichts ist ohne sein Gegenteil wahr." Nothing is true without its opposites. So no phenomenon exists in a vacuum. Loud is only loud in relation to soft, or tonal music, it only makes sense in...
What happens?
Am I still there?
Graham, we don't see a screen, don't see a shared screen, just for your information.
Oh dear.
You
Yeah.
know, I can make you host if you want. Co-host.
Yeah, it's better to do so.
Oh, could you make me host then?
Yeah. Oh no. I bet you are host.
And you don't see the text.
Mm-hmm.
Do you see the text?
On your
We saw
screen there.
something for a blink of a moment, but that's all. Maybe you should try again. Just share screen.
Yeah.
Oh, golly me.
When you share screen, you put
Share content, screen, cloud drive.
And then you click to your presentation. If you have many windows. No, yeah, we can see. We can see. Okay, wonderful.
You're okay now?
Yes,
yeah,
well, okay.
yeah.
Good, let's hope that works. I just hope I can get to the sound examples. But anyway, we'll continue for now. So we have the Martin Walser quotation, nothing is true without its opposite. So there are numerous parallels, including tonality and atonality, one being the opposite or an extension or another facet of the other. It struck me that ratio and emotio is also a kind of contrast, a kind of opposite. Schoenberg himself talks about the head and the heart, the balance between the intellect and instinct, or between spontaneity and deliberation. So in composing terms, you could say that the heart is like the inspiration, which in a sense happens spontaneously and without time. But of course, that's insufficient to make an entire piece. So that can only be converted into a coherent composition using the head in the sense of the intellect, working out the inspiration into a coherent piece in time. Then it struck me that Charybdis had defined rehearsal as defining extremes. So when we would rehearse like a Brahms symphony, he would rehearse an Übergang, a ritenuto, in two different ways. One with almost exaggeratedly too much ritenuto, and then too little ritenuto. So that would define a sort of area within which one could freely work and play in the context of the performance based on the events that had led to that particular point. Then a quick example from Turner, from the visual arts. He talked about imagination and reality. And at a recent exhibition in Munich, there was a very striking later picture of his featuring the sea, which was in the foreground, where you could see the individual crests of the waves and the different colors of the water. But then that merged imperceptibly into the sky in the distance. So it was like a sort of a blurred transition from the foreground to the distance. Now, just a few words of background to myself. I grew up in quite a sort of traditional upbringing. It struck me that our house in London was built in 1870. My school was founded in 1565, and my instrument was built in 1770, my cello. And I was brought up playing the classical quartet repertoire and in English choral tradition with hymns and psalms and anthems. So altogether, my upbringing, my background was fairly traditional. Then it struck me that the architecture that I was used to in London, for example, the Barbican, incorporated Roman remains, where you can see the aqueducts and the foundations of the villas, right next to a 17th century church by Wren, next to a 19th century pub, all incorporated within the complex of modern concrete concert hall. Then, as a child or as a young person, I attended the BBC Symphony Orchestra rehearsals of Boulez, playing Notation. My father was in the orchestra, and also pieces like Stockhausen's Zeitmaße. So even though the upbringing was fairly traditional, I was also used to hearing quite cutting-edge music. Although maybe the main influences were people more like Benjamin Britten, who was a friend also of my father, Finzi and Jean Francais. Then English studies at school incorporated Harold Pinter, Beckett and Joyce. And my first attempt to compose came out of a subversive idea to reinvent the string quartet, where the cello was like the first violin and the upper instruments were then confined to the accompanimental roles. Now I'm going to have 4 subsections, 2 with the cello, 2 with composing. The first, with cello, will discuss a few traditional aspects and then progressive aspects of the cello. And then in composition, I shall use the same 2 parameters of traditional and progressive. To start with the cello, as we know, it was developed from the violin in the late 16th century, obviously tuned in fifths. It was designed for perfect intervals, for diatonic scales. The fingering is such that it works out as making the diatonic scale, and is very good for arpeggios. And obviously its historic function was as a bass instrument. Rameau said that the cello is the foundation for basso continuo and obviously fulfills the bass, the harmonic function for the melodic line on top. It's been branded through the Jahrzehnten and centuries as an instrument of the soul, which is a slightly sentimental view of the cello, possibly. Casals pointed out that it was suited to the minor mode, perhaps thinking of the most important concertos by Dvorak, Elgar and Shostakovich, which are all in the minor. But it has an enormously wide compass of 5 octaves. Have I lost you again, or are we okay?
No, we're okay.
Good. I'm going to just play a few bars of the climax of the last movement of my second string quartet, which uses the cello in perhaps more of a traditional way of supporting the final bars of Lassus's motet, providing a rhythmic and a harmonic foundation. The movement is in 9/8 time, and the Lassus motet is called Prophetiae Sibyllarum, which is the motet on which the quartet is based. And now I'm going to see if I can find...
We do not hear anything. Graham?
No,
Yeah, I think he's looking for something.
no,
Yeah.
it should be playing.
It is not.
No, it's the
No. You know, I suggest we find it on your homepage, the recording in YouTube, in order to have the possibility to listen to your lecture.
Oh, what a shame. Well,
It's a pity, yeah, indeed.
You know that there is a button to switch on the audio. So usually when you share the screen, it's just the visible thing. And on the right side, there should be a button to share the audio tone. And that could be the solution.
as far as I know, when the session is recorded, there's no possibility to change. So
Okay.
as far as I know, because I perhaps
well, that's unfortunate. But in that case, I shall just have to continue without the sound examples. I could...
Okay, I think that's the best.
Is that the best?
Yeah,
Okay,
because otherwise we'll just lose time and we don't.
yeah. That's fair enough. Well, you'll have to imagine the wonderful music that should accompany these remarks, which is more.
That maybe if you send the recording separately of this lecture, then anybody can listen to that offline later on.
Fine, I can do that. Good. Well, in that case, I'll continue just with the text for the moment. So I divided the cello role into two. This was the cello as a kind of bass instrument, which is how obviously the cello was viewed through the centuries and was the basis of the classical string quartet. But beginning with late Beethoven, the cello became a sort of primus inter pares. It was no longer just the bass line supporting the lines above, but was thoroughly integrated into the web of musical sound as one of four contrapuntal lines. Curiously enough, you could draw a parallel with Renaissance music, where also there wasn't the hierarchy of bass to soprano, but each line had its own contour and relevance within the context of the whole. So my next example would have been an example of music where cello wasn't just the bass line, but was used in a context, in a much broader context of being one of several instruments all used in the same, with the same priority. Now I'll go to cello in a progressive aspects. It struck me that at one time in history, Vivaldi's Seasons and a bit later Berlioz's Symphonie Fantastique was the avant-garde music of the day. In winter, Vivaldi invented the idea of using ponticello, which is a very sort of wiry sound when the bow plays on the bridge. And that would have been a completely new sound at the time. And Berlioz in Symphonie Fantastique in the last movement uses collegno battuto, which is the sound of the wooden part of the bow slapping against the strings. And there it's a kind of Todestanz with the sort of rapping or the ricocheting of the wood against the strings. Debussy, in his cello sonata in 1915, widely extended the tonal palette with things like tremolando also combined with sul ponticello, and various types of pizzicato. Our president mentioned Liszt and Chopin, and indeed there is a tradition of composer performers. I have to say that it's much greater among violinists, with people like, I mean, pianists is understood, but just to go to stringed instrument players, one thinks of composers like Vieuxtemps or Isai or Paganini, who enormously extended the scope of violin playing through their own extraordinary techniques. And in clarinet, there's Jörg Wiedmann, and in double bass, there's the Italian Scodanibio. And it struck me that the word play in English has a double meaning. Of course, one thinks of play in terms of children playing with toys. One also thinks of instrumentalists like the ones we've mentioned, playing in the sense of trying things out, experimenting. And indeed, playing in the sense of extemporization or experimentation is a very important aspect of composing for one's instrument, because of course one tries out new things, one tries to extend the compasses, the sound palette of the instrument through trying things out in ways that obviously a non-instrumentalist wouldn't be able to achieve. The other thing is, as a player, you can experience at first hand and at close quarters how sound actually works. So you can hear different overtones, you can hear how, being attacked by mosquitoes, how different effects work acoustically, how others don't. One thinks of Lachenmann, who created certain very effective ideas, for example, bouncing the bow on the string with a sort of brrrr. And then the other one he would invent, another example, was bowing the peg, which looks spectacular but sounds totally nonsensical or useless, let's say. So that would be an example of something that is perhaps conceptually of interest, but practically not of interest. During lockdown, we were forbidden to play with colleagues. Chamber music was forbidden. So I wondered whether it would be possible to invent a type of chamber music for a solo instrumentalist. So I wrote this piece called Smithereens, which is due to be published, and I can send a link to one of the movements which I was going to play, which is called Hyper, which in a sense is a discourse between the performer, the player, in this case myself, and one's own instrument. So the focus of attention is less between lines between one performer and the other, but between how the composer interacts with his own instrument. Another aspect of cello playing is that by nature, it's a solo-lined instrument. And as composers will certainly testify, composition in a way becomes then interesting when you combine different things, when you combine musical lines, how different parameters, different expressions, different inventions react against each other. So I had the idea of combining the cello with the human voice to invent a kind of two-part counterpoint between the voice and the instrument. And one example I was going to play was a setting of Le Loup-Garou, which is a translation of Morgenstern's Werewolf into French. And I invented a new way of playing the cello without the bow, based nominally on Berriot's sequenza, where one stave is for one hand, one stave is for the other. And I invented this idea of sort of tapping, where you go like this, and you go, and then you can finger different notes, and then the sound of the flickering motion then changes. Again, there's a recording of that, which we can put online later on. Now we're going to go to composition, traditional aspects to begin with. I was going to play the first bars of my early composition for piano called Preludium. Being a cellist, of course, one is limited by the polyphony, by the attack, by the compass of the instrument, which, although 5 octaves or 4, still can't compete with the piano. So the first piece, Preludium, delights in the sonority of the piano, its brilliance of attack, and also the different possibilities of layering, where you can get, with a skillful piano playing, different types of line, different strata with cross rhythms happening at the same time. My next piece was going to be a meditative, reflective piece from a bagatelle called Weightless for clarinet, violin, and cello, which contrasts consonant intervals with dissonant intervals using imitative counterpoint, like a 2-part invention. Again, recording can follow. When I was at university, at Cambridge University, there was a performance of my string sextet, Opus 1. And it's fairly D minorish. It's quite sophisticated part writing. It was also inspired by Verklärte Nacht by Schoenberg, but is very much in the sort of German turn of the 19th to 20th century tradition. And I was immediately branded a reactionary and was considered then to be taking sides against a then quite strong avant-garde movement. And this reminded me of the Brahms-Wagner camp in the Neue Deutsche Schule. And I've always tried to fiercely resist this stereotypifying, although of course, it's inevitable that historians and commentators try to find labels for composers. And then a question of style. My music embraces quite a wide range in a sense. Unfortunately, you won't have heard the piece called Hyper, but that sounds about as avant-garde as it's possible to be on a cello, whereas Preludium sounds very C minorish and very much in the perhaps Russian early 20th century tradition. And I've tried not to think in terms of representing musical style, but assimilating material and trusting in the strength of the material to forge the course of the piece without trying to manipulate in too great a sense how the sound of the material, how the material affects the type of style that the piece then turns out to be in. Now, to go on to composition on the progressive aspects, I just took two matters here because obviously it's a massive subject and one can't but just scratch the surface. So I was going to take as my first example the second movement of my piece called Incantations, which is for piano and ensemble. It's a kind of concerto da camera. And in this piece, I used the dies irae, which is a famous plain chant used by composers right through the centuries. Too many to name, but including famous, including Paganini, Rachmaninoff, Lutosławski, among many others, list. And this, on one hand, it's a sort of tonal collection of notes, but on the other hand, it kind of floats in a non-tonal world because it was invented before questions of tonality and atonality were thought of. So it has this beautiful ambivalence, which is of great appeal to myself as well as presumably to the many composers through the centuries. And I tried to combine this with a more astringent type of harmony. So there was a sort of meeting of the old style of the plain chant with contemporary dissonant harmony. And in the course of the piece, I tried to think of a new definition for the word virtuosity, not just instrumental virtuosity, but sort of musicianly virtuosity in the sense of switching between the roles of soloist and protagonist to accompanist and troutiste. And that was also suggested by Schoenberg's Pierre Lunaire, where for many of the pieces, a particular instrumentalist is kind of erhoben or is lifted to the role of a soloist, and then in other of the pieces, it becomes an accompanist. Now, the second aspect was divorcing chords and triads from their functional capacity. One learns as a student how chords have certain relations and functions with each other. Obviously, dominant can go to tonic, and then there are different resolutions or from the diminished fifth or diminished seventh chord. And the idea here was to take chords as kind of sound objects devoid from their harmonic contexts. And I was going to play you an example from one of my bagatelles, which tries to espouse this idea. Now, time is running on, so I shall offer a few observations in conclusion that musicians benefit from embracing a wide range of styles and approaches. And I could quote my memories of rehearsing Bernd Alois Zimmermann's piano trio, Présence, which is a very complex piece with unusual notation and very complex ensemble playing with 5s against 13s and aleatoric passages which have to align against each other with different concepts of speed and tempo, highly complex music, thoroughly rewarding. And I had the luck and good fortune to play with wonderful musicians with whom we realized quite accurate and spirited performances. And I noticed that having rehearsed Bernd Alois Zimmermann, our performance of Haydn, or our rehearsing of Haydn, took place on an entirely different level. So just to say that contemporary music can also color one's attitudes and skill with historic music in a very palpable way. It struck me that listening to Webern's 6 orchestral pieces in a performance with the BBC Symphony Orchestra changed one's listening of the Brahms 4th Symphony. In other words, the Brahms music sounded quite different and in some ways more sophisticated and more forward-looking in the context of Webern than it would have done, for example, if it had come, say, following a Starmit symphony or something historical. Then a knowledge of jazz can maybe inspire one to, in ways of improvisation in a classical or musical context that would otherwise not be the case. At university, I tried just out of sheer curiosity playing in a jazz band, and soon after I dared improvise a cadenza for the Boccherini cello concerto, and I noticed that my brush with jazz was a great help in trying to improvise a spontaneous cadenza. Another example, studying Bach's Das musikalische Opfer with its fabulously sophisticated canonic writing shed light on Boulet's notation, which also uses canonic devices and retrograde in canonical systems. The old system sheds again light on the new. So just as one seeks a kind of balance in composition, the ultimate balance of which perhaps could be defined as the horizontal balancing out with the vertical, i.e. the thematic, the melodic balancing out with the harmonic, which is, of course, a massive subject, but just trying to encapsulate it into a nutshell. This idea of balance of opposites, in a way, could be extended to life itself, where one also has to balance contrasting manifestations of life or occupations, such as practicing one's instrument, whether that takes priority over performing or composing, writing, teaching takes up time, traveling, and even preparing lectures. These things have to be balanced out as far as possible. Another sense of balance that perhaps is in the shortfall, it struck me that the Munich concert series of Musica Viva and the abonnement of the Munich Philharmonic are poles apart, where Musica Viva offers exclusively cutting-edge music. Munich Philharmonic offers a program that is at least 90% of music written perhaps before 1910 or 1912. And the audiences obviously are very different. And I was wondering whether in an ideal musical world, one should combine in a concert program the historic and the new. In a sense, they belong together, just as Vivaldi and Berlioz were at one time cutting-edge music. In a sense, the music of today will one day be historic music. So they exist, in a sense, in equilibrium and should be, if possible, treated in concert programming as such. And in the occasions when I try to program chamber music concerts, I find that there's a great benefit in programming historic music with the new, and try to follow this policy.
Graham, excuse me, Dušan just asked me, please, can you in 3 minutes finish your presentation?
Yes, indeed.
Thank you so much.
With great pleasure. Yeah, just a quick example from the French Revolution, which began as a peaceful, honorable attempt to change various aspects of society, and very quickly descended into a sort of radical tyranny, just as an example of an extreme of what can go wrong if one follows one extreme rather than incorporating all aspects within a single thinking. So, as final sentence, one's desire is for a musical life embracing all aspects of the old and new, which can enhance, enliven, and ennoble each other. Each, of course, has its legitimate place in the musical life and in life in society in general. And let's hope that these can continue side by side in a diverse and indeed changing world. A great pleasure to share my thoughts. Many thanks indeed. And I shall try and make the recordings available for anyone that's interested.
Wonderful. That would be very nice to have. We often have a problem with presentation of music. Even, in my case, I had a presentation and it was a disaster regarding music. So that's why I suggested you to make it offline.
Well, I shall try and do better next time. Yeah, blast it. But at least the recordings will be available later.
Wonderful. Okay, thank you for a very interesting lecture. Now it's my turn to introduce Professor Annette Kerckhoff. She's deeply involved in healing, not just medicine, but healing. And when I was looking at web pages, I saw that actually some parts of our, I would say, health sciences have roots both in Western and Chinese medicine. I saw your comments on food and so on. Very interesting. She's a professor and dean of the faculty in Berlin about health sciences and sports. And I'm really looking forward to your talk, because medicine, or actually not medicine, but healing is a bit broader discipline than just medicine. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much. It was, I'm very, very honored to speak here. And dear Violeta and dear Professor Šuput, I think that these talks and this colloquium is such a good idea, because the dialogue, we are also specialized. The dialogue really is indispensable for science and development of the future science. And I had the impression it's like every one of us just looks only with one eye, but together we can see something like three-dimensional. And before I start with my own talk, Graham, I must tell you that in traditional medicine everywhere in Europe, I mean, I'm more an expert on traditional European music, but it's also in Ayurveda or traditional Chinese medicine, the equilibrium, the balance is kind of the clue to health. That is something like a common result. So now I share my screen. Here we are. And I hope you can see this, right?
We do.
Okay, wonderful. So as you already heard, we do not only talk about medicine, but of healing. That has a certain reason, although healing and health is a kind of issue of women, it is very hard to find women in early history of medicine. So what are we going to do today in this lecture? We have a small outline of medical history, women in medicine. You will look, I can introduce some wonderful historical ladies to you. Then we go and have a look on their resources and competencies, if they have something in common. I will just look a little bit on recent research results and my current projects in this field. Start with medical history. Women in medicine, they had been medical doctors, female medical doctors in the Greek antique. There was a Dr. Agnoduke, but then we only had something like in Europe, the women in the cloister medicine, like Hildegard von Bingen, and in the 12th century in the school of Salerno. And after that, the women were kind of pushed out a little bit out of the university. So in my talk now, I want to make a division. I want on the one hand talk about professionals, which are the ones who went to university or had an education, but I concentrate on doctors and scientists. And on the other hand, the women in the 19th century and early 20s who just worked outside the university and who did not study and who did not have a professional education. In Germany, we have something very special. It's the Heilpraktiker. It's a kind of profession from the Nazis, but I will not talk about that because it would become too broad. Now look at this. And here you see Nadezhda Prokofievna Suslova. Well, it was not allowed for women to go to university. Why? Because they did not have access to higher education. They did not have the school education, so then they could not enter university, at least in Germany. And in Switzerland, the universities were a little more tolerant. They allowed students as guest students. And Nadezhda, when she was 20, she's from Russia, when she was 20, she read this novel of Chernyshevsky, Was tun, what to do. And in this novel, there was a female doctor. So then she, with only 21, she decided to go to Zurich and start to go into lectures, to go in the lecture hall and just visit every lecture she could get. That was really new. So she did that for 2 years and did all the exams as a guest student, then made her exams, then got kind of immatriculated and went back to Russia, to the Black Sea, and opened a hospital and a school there. And I think this is really very, very impressive that the beginning of women studying in Europe, studying medicine, is because of a heroine in a fiction, in a fiction book, in a novel. So she really was the start of it all, and others followed. The first woman in Germany who did the same was Hope Bridges Adams Lehmann. She had a half English, half German parents. She went to Leipzig, and there as well, she attended all lectures of university as a guest student and did all exams. Well, at that time, it was not allowed in Germany to work as a doctor or even kind of study officially. So what did she do? She married a doctor so he could sign all her prescriptions. And 25 years later, in 1903, women were allowed to study. And then, nearly 25 years after she had studied, she gave all her exams and all her reports, and then she would be the first doctor. She was very interested in the health of women, and she wrote this book. You can see Das Frauenbuch, the book for women. And I have these books here because I'm kind of so proud to have got them on flea markets and wherever. And it was like 2 volumes, very, very big books, more than 1,000 pages. And the first book was on health in general, medicine in general. And the second was mainly about sexuality and female diseases with a lot of pictures. So at that time, which was really amazing, women for the first time were educated about their own body. The first doctor, born 1 year later, who was also interested in educating people and wrote a book which was even still bigger than the one, is Anna Fischer-Dückelmann. And she mainly was interested in healthcare, health promotion, and children. And she was the first naturopathic female doctor. So she later on worked in the Monte Verita in Tessin in Switzerland, and she educated people, and mainly women, what they could do at home. This title, Die Frau als Hausärztin, means something like woman as a doctor for the home. And it was enormously successful. She wrote it in 1901, and already in 1913 she had a million books sold. That is what she says as the title, The Woman as a Family Doctor. Just can't see it myself. A medical reference book of healthcare and medicine in the family, with special consideration of women and childhood diseases, obstetrics and child care. Whoops. The fourth kind of professional I want to introduce to you is the first Berlin professor, Lydia Rabinovich-Kempner. And you can see a quotation here about what she did, but she mainly was the assistant of Robert Koch. Robert Koch got the Nobel Prize in 1905 for finding the tuberculosis pathogens, the tubercle bacillus, and that was a very, very important result of his research, because then you knew what would make the people sick. It was also very exciting because you had the reason why people got sick, but you did not have a cure. And Lydia Rabinovich-Kempner herself lost her daughter Nadezhda, who was named after the first Switzerland doctor, and her husband to tuberculosis. And she did research on the way of infection. She found out that you would find the tubercle bacillus in butter, and she found then out that it was in milk. And she would not rest until milk was now controlled and pasteurized. So here we have 4 professionals, which you see on the left side, and we'll now turn to female lay healers. I wrote my doctor's thesis on that topic, and I was mainly interested if the kind of herbal woman, the lay healer who would work somehow outside and heal people, if that would fit to the image of the herbalist or evil witch from fairy tales. Now, it is very difficult to find lay healers because they usually pass on their knowledge orally and they just take it in their grave. But I decided then to focus at first, for the first step, on kind of prominent lay healers, female lay healers, those who invented therapies or who wrote books or who founded places or very institutions. And what I found were these wonderful, beautiful ladies. These ones are all kind of really prominent female lay healers from Europe, and you will get to know them in the next sheets and slides. I must say they are my beauties, but we also have these ones, which are very famous for European history of lay healing women, and they represent a different type. So what I did, I tried to kind of make different types of these women. Yeah, how was their approach to healing, and what did they do? It was either their profession or what they did their whole life, or the reason why they turned to get interested into medicine and healing at all. I start with the artists, and you see on the left Emma Kunz from Switzerland. She's a very famous artist. She painted like 500 paintings, exhibitions with Joseph Beuys. She painted with a pendulum, as you can see below, and she also healed people with that pendulum. On the right side, Katharina Kohlhoff, she's also a painter living next to Berlin. She was married to a painter, and they were kind of in the Berlin scene of that time. She then lost her two boys in both different reasons, one as a soldier and one because of an infection, and she kind of became very shy, and she was very sensitive. She was described as from her nephew, which I talked to, as very subtle and educated, and she just kind of helped people who came to her, and she was doing palmistry. What you see below on the photo is what the Rotary Club in Bazzaro, where that was, kind of they built a monument for her. So that is my artist. Then we have a kind of different type of person, female entrepreneurs. The lady on the left side, she founded a spa near Dachau, near Munich, which was in the size comparable to what Sebastian Kneipp did. I mean, nobody knows that. It's called Maria Brunn, and she had something like 60 people working for her. On the right side, Magdalena Maddaus, who is known to everybody who is into iridology, so making the diagnosis with the eye, and homeopathic complex treatment. There is a whole firm with Maddaus Komplexmittel. We come to Ida Hoffmann, one of the sweethearted utopian people. She walked from Germany to the Tessin to Ascona, and there she founded the Monte Verita. The Monte Verita was an area which she bought with her friend Henri Oedenkoven. They had money from the parents. The parents were very shocked when they went there. They had something like 94,000 square meters. Hermann Hesse was there. Laban, the expression dance, was invented there. And there she founded this place with a hotel, houses, 11 light air huts, tennis court, open air showers, open air track, light air bars, clay bars, swimming pool, tea house, central house with music and lecture and cultural program, and a library. And what she wanted to do, she wanted to found a naturopathic institution for those people who, by following a simple and natural way of life, either find temporary rest or convalescence through permanent residence, and want to join his ideas and his work of her friend in word and deed. So she really invented a big place, which is still very nice to visit. Then we got teachers. Clara Muche, she wrote a lot of these little booklets. What you can see is what does the woman owe to her health? That is what is standing, what you can see on this little booklet. She was a very good writer and a very prolific author and speaker. And on the right side, Anita Backhaus, who wrote that book Heilen ohne Pillen und Spritzen, which means something like healing without pills and injections. And she also founded a health resort called Villa Turingia in Colombia, where she tried to bring people to a healthy lifestyle. A totally different approach from this woman, Grete Flach, because she was not a teacher, she was not an artist, she was a farmer. She had a farm for 20 years, and she gained all her knowledge from her grandfather, who was a shepherd. And to be honest, there is a lot of recipes, like very short sentences, like a cookbook, a lot of knowledge. And she was then practicing illegally in Germany. We slowly come to the end, but we still have the journalist, Maria Treben, and everybody who is here from Austria will know her because she was very famous. She she wrote that book, which was sold more than 9 million times, and she made the so-called Swedish bitter popular. If you look in this book, it's very different from the ones before. The ones before were more like a cookbook. And here she has more than 100 case studies that describe amazing healing stories in a very emotional writing. So her approach to healing was not farming, was not teaching, but she comes from the writers. She was the assistant of Max Brod, the administrator of Franz Kafka, and she worked at the Prager Tagblatt. And that made her so very, very popular. Then we have this kind of real nurse. We didn't have that type so far. She didn't write a book, even if you can see it here. She also wrote little notes. She comes from the south of Tyrol, Südtirol in Italy. And she was very famous there. She wrote these little notes, and her nephew then gathered them all together, gave them to a pharmacist, and they made a kind of really, really wonderful book, which is, as you can see, this is kind of a really good book because it also evaluates the recipes. The last one, the concerned mother, Maria Schlenz, was very famous because she was the one that was kind of protected from the Nazis, so they very much wanted to push her forward, which she refused. She was in favor of doing something like cures, especially hot baths. So this is the female lay healers, which I wanted to show to you. And you can see we have different types. It is not the typical witch, not at all. These women were highly educated. They spoke several languages. And what is interesting, they also worked in different fields of healing, not only curing sick people. All of them, which are marked here, were somehow interested in educating people about helping themselves. You can find that in all the biographies I told you, although they were so different. And the interesting thing is that, as you can see here, they, in their health guides, which I analyzed, you could see they had a very pragmatic approach. They would not only say, what can I do myself? What can I do with the means at my disposal? And that is a different view from those who had clinics or public institutions. I have to get, okay, now I can see better. If we would describe this concept of the women in modern terms, we would talk about patient literacy. That is a kind of a competence for patients. We would talk about self-efficacy, that you have the feeling you can help yourself. We would talk about resilience. We would talk about care or self-care or connection, that you have a connection to the one you take care of or to yourself. We talk about awareness in all these recipes and these suggestions in these books, because you have to look at yourself, how things are going, if it becomes better or not. We talk about rest and kind of a rhythm of the day, about rituals. We talk about storytelling. This helped your grandfather. That's what my father always did when he had this and that. About positive expectation, the whole placebo research, and the low threshold entry. So what can I do with what I get at home, so I do not have to buy something? If we have this in a circle, we can see there are a lot of them, all the kind of reddish or pinkish parts of this diagram. They are kind of unspecific. We have a lot of unspecific healing factors. And on top comes, for these women in this kind of historical situation, it's not a sex thing, it's not genetic, it was kind of just in their role. They need some kind of material and they need some knowledge. And what they often use are the resources they got at home. And then they need the knowledge. And we find that even today on the internet, people try to find this knowledge, but at that time, that were the books that were passing on how to use an onion for making a, let's say, a syrup for coughing. Because what we are talking about is not a normal soup, or it's not a pharmaceutical product. It's something in between. It's syrups, it's compresses, it is how you cook rice if you have diarrhea, or how you cook rice if you have constipation. And what I found out in another project, that even nowadays, that is a project from Berlin, where for 2 years I had interviews with women from several countries, and I asked, what are you doing when your kids are feeling bad, or to strengthen them. They also would show what they have at home, and it's mainly their food stuff. That is not a sex thing, that's a role thing, but we know that women who are cooking, who are at home in history and nowadays in this role, they have certain knowledge about how to use food for very specific recipes. And there's one research which is 10 years old, but it's the only one that really checked that out. When do people help themselves and what do they do? And there they found out 80% of respondents used home remedies before pharmaceutical preparations, and what they use is mainly food stuff. And that is what is really interesting. If you're at home, if there's something wrong with your kid, you cannot go outside, then how to know how to do something with onions or lemons or whatever. Now, if we sum the whole thing up, we have this home remedy woman's world, historical or in the ethnomedical view. And we see there are a lot of good things, everything in green, but surely all lay people are not able to do a correct diagnosis or a follow-up or something. And the biggest risk is procrastination of the disease. In the world of medicine, if I put that kind of a little placative in a contrast, there is not the time to tell people how they make a potato compress or an onion syrup. So what is my vision is to put that together, to document these self-help strategies, this medicine from the kitchen, then evaluate that with plausibility. Is it plausible or is it risky to just leave everything out, which is risky? And then that the doctors themselves could say, okay, in this case, I would suggest just kind of on top, have a tea or have a hot water bottle or whatsoever. That is what I'm going to do in future. Right now, I'm busy with these projects. We have a kind of association with people from traditional European medicine, TEM Forum. It's kind of just founded like 4 weeks ago. And I then suggested that because we are such a big network there, we could take a questionnaire about these home remedies, and kind of everybody tries to find elderly ladies to fill it out. And there we have a pharmacist, a doctor, a nurse, and somebody who is from cultural sciences. We can evaluate these recipes, or at least first document them. And I'm very glad that a wonderful scientist from Austria, Karin Buchert, and I are going to write a book for Springer about nutraceutica for doctors. So we address the doctors to say, okay, these are really safe and helpful recipes from the kitchen. And if you think that is sensible, you can recommend it to your patients and kind of print out the recipe, how it should be done. To finish, the take-home message are: female lay healers are not witches, but represent various types and approaches to healing, and are really often very cultivated women who have a very important view on healing. They have a focus on children's and women's health, prevention, health promotion, symptomatic treatment, regeneration, and simple diseases, a very pragmatic approach. special recipes for using domestic resources, and all that would be a wonderful supplement for medicine if it's integrated and controlled, and it should be documented and evaluated. So that's what I'm going to do, and then I can come back in 2 or 3 years to say what I found out. My last picture is something I found in the Pitt Rivers Museum in Oxford. It's a talisman, and it's a potato from 1907, carried by a Dutch gentleman to prevent rheumatism. And so I thank you for your attention, and hope I'm 30 minutes. I have just got it. Thank you so much.
Well, thank you very much for interesting presentations. And Violeta, I think you can open now the forum for discussions.
Thank you so much. So we have 2 presentations in which we have a kind of correspondences. Graham Waterhouse between old and new, and you between medicine and home medicine. So incredible. I'm so happy to open this session. And I would like also to invite you, if please, if I do not see you, or if we do not see you, please begin to speak. I'm sure I see here.
Wolfgang is trying to get.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Oh, Wolfgang, wonderful. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much for those 2 highly inspiring presentations. I have 2 questions. First, a question to Graham. I'm very happy you referred also to history and to ancient Greek. In ancient Greek, Plato, in Timaeus, he said there is the harmony of the universe and there is the harmony of the soul. And if they break apart, somebody falls ill. So his idea was the music can reharmonize the harmony of the universe and the harmony of the soul. So my question has to do with your historical and new view. You focused very precisely on the evolution of music. In psychiatry, also in other fields of medicine, we are permanently faced with new syndromes. So my question, do you think that new music would be able to perhaps not really heal, but to alleviate syndromes? So is there, in your opinion, a parallel movement between historical new music and classical and new syndromes in medicine? That's a typical musical medical question, which is, in my opinion, really highly important.
Very interesting idea. One thinks of Hindemith, Harmonie der Sphären. Now, music was based on physics in the sense that the first interval that was really invented or was perceived was like the octave, and that is manifest in, you could say, like a father, for instance, singing with his son. The distance between a female or a child's voice and a female and a male voice is basically an octave. So you could think that was the first octave that humans used, and it's also the first interval in the harmonic series. The fifth is then the next interval in the harmonic series, and interestingly enough, that was the first interval that the early composers used for harmonization in the Notre Dame school. When you say healing, it reminds me of humans are always trying to find parallels in nature or parallels in the physical world which can relate to their own being. And in a sense, the the intervals of the harmonic series, first the octave, the fifth, and then eventually going to the triad, and then you get the seventh, and then the sort of the thirds and sixths. In a sense, that's healing, in the sense that we humans can relate to it because it's a force of nature. And the early music took these Urintervalle as the basis for their music, which perhaps meant that humans could more easily and quickly relate to those that type of way of thinking in and about music. Now, contemporary music often, not exclusively, you can't really define new music as a thing, because nowadays it's so vastly spread. You get, pop music uses 3 chords, and minimal music uses 1 chord or whatever. You can't generalize, but perhaps, as I understand your use of the word, it divorces itself from the basic laws of tonality which relate to the laws of physics, and therefore it's an aspect of listening and relating to sounds that's possibly more divorced from the human experience than music might have been in the earlier times. One also thinks of folk music, which also uses the simple intervals that we're used to, that the sort of fifths and thirds and the chords of the notes of the chord. Whereas what you perhaps mean by contemporary music, one thinks of atonal music or aleatoric music. In a sense, this is more music for the senses, for the intellect, perhaps without such an unmittelbar connection to the soul of a human and to what was always considered that music could do. I mean, Shakespeare said, "Music hath charms to calm the savage breast," and how right he was. I mean, music can be used to stimulate every single emotion under the sun and more. And I guess it's the task of the healer to select the right type of music for the right type of situation.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you. May I just tell only a few words? It's so wonderful. The question is wonderful and the answer is wonderful. I would add only the aspect that you speak, dear Graham, about European music. If we think about music of other continents, we discover that not everybody reacted. Not all the tradition have to do with Pythagora overtones.
Yes, that's very true. I visited Syria about 20 years ago, and we were discussing that. I always understood that humans listened to music according to the principles of the harmonic series, and that the first intervals you relate to are the octave, the fifth, and the fourth. But the Syrian very, very plausibly said he'd grown up with 3/4 tones, and for him that was the natural music, and that was an eye-opener. And I thought, well, yes, that's right. Humans are conditioned by their environment, not by the supposed laws of physics, which is what.
And we have also in Europe the tradition of the Byzantine music, which is also depending on, not on Pythagoras. So, excuse me, Dušan, I interrupted you.
No, it's all right. I was very interested in a paper wrote by Wolfgang Masnak about music, and one thing which strikes me quite often, in art or anything, there's a huge span from being pleasant or unpleasant, just to make people think or to enjoy, to look at something, to listen or look at something just emotionally or intellectually. And I'm not sure that every type of music can be healing. That's the first question for Graham. And the second question would be for Annette, because it's it's very important we forget about ecology. It will look that I'm far away, but you showed many examples of using natural substances in healing I would say also in medicine, because you can go to pharmacy and further. And all this is vanishing from in front of our eyes because of ecology, the oceans. If you just look at soft corals, there are thousands of substances which are biologically active and disappearing. If you look at rainforest, so many things are disappearing. But if I come back to your lecture, which is a kind of link between healing and medicine, you showed something very important. And I'm not sure if everybody noticed that healing was mostly dealing with symptoms because there's no diagnosis. And in many cases, it can work. Of course, if there's not serious disease, but let's say cough. I thought coughing could be cured by I don't know what, but cough is maybe not due to lungs. Maybe it's a heart condition or something else. So what would you suggest? What should be the link between medicine and other fields of healing? Because I have a feeling that there's a kind of mistrust between the two parts of healing. We don't, in medicine, we say, okay, it's evidence-based, we have to do, and if something goes wrong, everybody shows, you see, that's wrong, medicine is wrong because one case was not successful. And in healing, maybe somebody is cured from cancer for I don't know which reason, and everybody will say, you see, alternative medicine is the one that can heal you. But I think we have to find a solution that it would be complementary, not only evidence-based and not only anecdotal. So these are two of my questions.
Yes, I totally agree. I find it very interesting to document and save these recipes and this approach, but I always hear in the last 20 years that it's like two parallel worlds. So it's important that the doctor knows what is going on and what the patient does, and then he can decide if it's the proper therapy and the proper self-help strategy. And we always find these difficulties when it's not matched. So the medicine of the future would be a medicine where, let's say, we have some kind of patient academy where really safe self-help strategies are taught with their possibilities and risks. Because this first thing diagnosis is not possible from lay people. And the second thing, what you said, taking resources from nature. If you train people, and I've given these classes at the Charité for quite some time ago, before I went to university and taught there. But I gave these patient classes at the Charité in Berlin about home remedies. So it kind of the doctors were really looking on top of that. But then we could be sure that it's just an additional tool for one system of healing. And then if people learn that they need high quality food for these home remedies, they value the food itself, because then food is medicine. I wanted to say something to Wolfgang's question and the sound of and the healing in these women's recipes and the patients' possibilities. For example, you know, all these lullabies. Lullabies are just a very simple thing how to soothe little children so they sleep. Or we have in Germany, we have these little songs like Heile, heile Segen, morgen gibt es Regen, übermorgen. If a child hurts itself, you know, you kind of sing this little song. And and we also have kind of real healers who talk rhythm. It's like a formula. They say, take this, and in 3 days the fever will go away. It's kind of very rhythmic. Spruchheiler for those who are from Germany. So there are a lot of, and we talked and wrote about that already, a lot of auditive musical things, even in everyday healing at home, which would be worthwhile to compare in different countries.
Mhm. Thank you. And Graham, what would you comment about the types of music that could be healing or maybe just the opposite?
Well, an interesting question. I wouldn't have thought most composers work with the idea of healing. I mean, two pieces from the history that immediately come to mind are the Goldberg Variations by Johann Sebastian Bach, which was written to heal insomnia, and Marin Marais, which was specifically written in order to heal someone after an operation to remove gallstones without anesthetic. In fact, it was for the son of the Dauphin, the son of Louis XIV. Most composers write in order to touch the spirit, to move someone, to make the heart, the pulse go faster, to achieve a sort of level of enhanced being or excitement. I mean, you think of the sort of Beethoven Ninth Symphony or the Mahler Fifth Symphony, the great works of art. That's life enhancing for us humans. It sort of brings us to new ways of thinking, of perceiving ourselves, of perceiving the world. In a sense, that is a type of healing. But I wouldn't have thought that healing is a principal raison d'être for beginning on writing a piece. And nowadays, of course, the field of music is so incredibly wide, and everyone has his or her opportunity to select that type of music required for the particular mood. And with music therapy as a growing subject of science, great research is being done. One of my cousins is studying music therapy, and I'm sure there's phenomenal research to be done on how indeed music can soothe, and the savage has charms to soothe the savage breast within each and every one of us humans.
Yeah, because it's quite interesting. You mention, let's say, sometimes they say, okay, this ugly person, ugly patient, or not very pleasant patient, always complaining, being angry at everybody, he will be cured very soon. But maybe somebody who's very humble and patient and will take everything for granted from other people, he's just going away. So maybe music that makes people angry could help too, not only the music that can make people very relaxed.
Well, I mean, music's
I
being
have
used
no
in all...
idea about that. It's just my guess.
Yeah, well,
Thank
I mean,
you so
music's
much. Look, we have Anna Rubin. Anna Rubin, she is a composer from America. She gave, please, Anna. And then Rami Shaheen also.
Thank you. Wonderful presentations. I wanted to ask Annette, I loved your chart with the different aspects of healing, and you mentioned ritual in there, but you didn't speak much about it, and I know we don't have much time, but I was fascinated by that aspect of ritual and healing.
Thank you.
Yes. Thank you. It's we find now that all these aspects were in, like, say, 30, 40 years ago, one say, oh, it's not pharmacological, you know, it's nothing worse. Now we know how important that is. And doing something every evening, or having a little structure in your day life, or if you have sleeping disorder, opening your window and something like this, it helps you, because ritual is always good against stress. If you're doing something and you are used to it, you know, it's kind of relaxing. And so it's important that you have rituals in your day-to-day life against stress. But that is the important role of rituals, which we see in shamanism, you know, in shamanism and in healing rituals, in the magical medicine, something is just done again and again, and that is a healing factor itself. So thank you very much. Yes.
Thank you so much.
I was writing about
Okay.
it, yes.
And now the next one is Rami, and then Bosyan. Rami, hello.
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 We don't see you.
Yeah,
we
thank you
don't
very
hear
much
you.
for.
Okay.
Yeah, thank you very much for both lecturers. It was very nice to listen to both of them. Perhaps I should make. Oh, my camera is not working. Oh, sorry. Yeah, actually, my question perhaps now for Graham. Actually, I know his beautiful, wonderful music, but would you call, for example, your music something like more British, as far as you have more influence from Britain, or I mean, would you call it like give it a national name or European name or personal name? I mean, for a composer, would you count composers in this case, because you gave us some background for about your music? So would you count your music more personal or national or European? And about microtonal, nowadays in the world there are two kind of microtonals. The first one, which is the contemporary microtonals. The second one is the traditional worldwide music microtonals. So would you think that you can understand contemporary microtonals more than traditional microtonals, putting in consideration also that the Pythagorean tuning system existed before in Babylonian and in Egypt? Even there are many theories that Pythagoras studied in Egypt and then went back to Greece. So in this case, would you call music and the influence that the composer or a musician have it personal or local or more international? And thank you very much. I'm glad to listen to both of your lecturers. Thank you.
Ah, Rami, well, it's lovely to hear your voice. Can't see you at the moment.
Sorry.
You've got a very dark suntan by the looks of it.
Yeah, sorry, because my camera is not working now, so perhaps I can.
Oh yeah, well, we have full sympathy with technique that doesn't work. Well, regarding your first question, highly interesting. Well, it was pointed out that part of the Britishness of music was the openness to foreign influence all the way through the centuries. Society in general has been very open to influences. I mean, obviously going right back to the Normans, the Vikings, then later on the Indians, Africans. The British society has been very open to a wide range of influences, and so has British music. It's difficult to talk about music nowadays that's rooted to a particular country. On the other hand, talking about personal music also sounds a bit sort of egocentrical. Of course, every composer, as we know, is open to all influences. I mean, Mahler himself said that a symphony should embrace the world of experience. So perhaps it's kind of a somewhere between the idea of European. I mean, I'm a proud European living in the middle of Europe. Obviously, I have very strong British ties, but perhaps it's somewhere, insofar as such a question can be answered at all, between a sort of a personal style that derives from some synthesis between Britishness, whatever that means, and Europeanness, which by their very nature are thoroughly intertwined.
Thank you very much. I would like to tell you that Rami Shakin is also a composer, Syrian composer. He collaborated with Graham Waterhouse for a long time, and I'm very happy that you both are here. Now, Bostian, please.
Yes, thank you. So I would have, how to say, a very classical question about a phenomena that is mesmerizing, and we cannot predict how it will turn out and what will be at the end. I'm talking about, I would like to ask a question to Mr. Waterhouse. I was very impressed by his lecture, and I wanted to ask something, because we know, so nowadays we are talking about artificial intelligence, and we are guessing what it would be. But I would like to propose a certain parallel with the music and with arts. So I think, as far as I know the artificial intelligence, but my knowledge is, how to say, small and very reduced, but nevertheless I will try to make an analogy. I think that artificial intelligence has much to do with arts and with humanities, for the simple reason because its principle is to go from below, from above to descend to below. So we have, how to say, arts and humanities are guided by intuition, by feeling, by feelings, by experiences, and so on. And when we write a poem, we write, how to say, we are guided blindly by something in us, because, and that something in us would be called, how to say, a multitude of knowledge, impressions, thoughts, and so on and so on. So we have on our disposition a large amount of data, and from these data and from our experiences and so on, we make a poem or a piece of music or something like that. Everything in like with the artificial intelligence and like with the creation in arts, it's, how to say, unpredictable. On the other hand, we have natural sciences. We have another path going in the opposite direction. We have, for example, E is the mc2, and from this formula we can explain the universe. So we go, it's a sort of induction compared to deduction. We go from small to the large and to the global. And with some formulas, natural sciences explain the principles of things and so on. Now, what would it be? I think that arts are most, how to say, they are very resemblance with artificial intelligence, and there's a sort of, so I would say, osmosis between artificial intelligence and arts and music. I know that you can, with ChatGPT-4, you can order something like Beethoven or a mixture between Brahms and Beethoven. And so what would be the role of artificial intelligence in the music? And how would it interfere with your work, Mr. Waterhouse? Thank you very much.
Well, it's a subject that's greatly discussed in contemporary composers' lives. In the German Composers Society, the subject always comes up. Two things strike me. One is that Beethoven's 10th Symphony was reconstructed by artificial intelligence and played within the last year by my friend who plays in the orchestra of the Bonn Beethoven Orchestra. As you may know, there are about 36 bars of a minuet that was supposed to constitute Beethoven's 10th Symphony. It was the beginning. And using the knowledge acquired by artificial intelligence, whatever that is, they reconstructed the symphony. And my friend said it was absolutely diabolical. He didn't go into details saying how and why, but in some ways it's terrifying, the idea that artificial intelligence can take over what we humans hold dearest, which is the uniqueness of creation. Yes. Every human being is different. Every human being has unique genes and a unique setup. What is it about a true Beethoven symphony that transcends all reason and rationale and creates something that is truly magnificent to behold and has been a bewildering and astounding human since the early 19th century? What is it? there must be some aspect of the subconscious. And I noticed you used that word. You said that a poem is also guided by something deeply within us. Well, how true. I mean, that is the essence of us humans. There's something unique. There's something in the subconsciousness that commands or that helps or guides us. I mean, Benjamin Britten said, I must have a very clever subconscious, because a lot of the time I don't know how I work, but it just works. And there must be some aspect of the creative process that goes beyond everything that artificial intelligence is able to achieve with any amount of reckoning or putting 2 + 2 together. There's some invisible human strength or spirit that guides that guides human creation in a different way, and that ultimately is our hope for the survival of the human spirit, rather than it one day being placed, God forbid, by an artificial means of creation. I mean, I know that pop songs can be fairly easily created, and all there are American radio programs that sort of spew out hundreds and hundreds of new pop songs, some of which are very popular. Whether that could be achieved for something as complex as an orchestral score or a string quartet or I don't know, a sophisticated piano piece or a wind quintet, which is a far, far more complex edifice or aspect of human creativity than just simple 3-chord pop song.
Thank you so much, Graham. You see, we have also in the chat, if music is a manifestation of our psychology, it makes sense to me that various forms of composition highlight the energy of music and so on. I'm so sorry we did not mention the chat, but Dušan,
I think it was wonderful. I'm sure discussion could be still longer, but usually we are limited to 1 hour and 30 minutes. So, but maybe just to comfort you a bit, during your response, I reminded a front page in review Nature. And in this paper, behind this front page, was about beautiful faces of young women. And many of them were artificially constructed. So every face was beautiful. But when they were shown to students of medicine, they always chose non-artificially made women without knowledge. So some mistakes are important in life. And if artificial intelligence does not make any mistake, I think it's doomed in...
We call it in German Schönheitsfehler.
Okay.
So mistakes of beauty mistakes.
Really, it was very enjoyable. I'm sure discussion could be very long, but Violeta, I think we have to end. So please.
Yeah, and we would also like to tell you that the next semester is already fixed, and we are very happy to invite you also for the next semester. Please write us if you have special desires, and I would like so much to send you the YouTube's addresses of Graham. So please call us, send us the mail. We would like it. Thank you so much again, Annette and Graham. All the best, a lot of inspiration and health for you, and see you in the next semester.
Have a nice summer.
Bye. Have a nice summer. Bye.
Thank you so much.